The Guardians equipment trunk is on its way to Arizona, as many of you pointed out over the weekend and Friday. And Locked On Guardians is back in your feed 5 days a week starting today. Let's get in a baseball mood.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. I think we're both dealing with some colds, so it could be some sneezes, some jump cuts. We'll be battling through this today, but there is so much to talk about, so I'm not going to waste any more time. I know people will be like, "What? Nothing's happening," but I don't know. It is nothing really happening.
Yes and no at the same time. It was a busy weekend around baseball. I mean, there was news, hence why we're giving you a news episode today versus a pre-planned content episode. We finished all of our Let's Make a Deal episodes, which we'll revamp for next year because those decreased in popularity throughout the winter, which is what it is. And we have a bunch of prospect stuff coming up. We've got some interview stuff coming up and college stuff. Obviously, we'll do a lot of draft stuff coming up. But yeah, there was news. I mean, ESPN dropped their top 100 last week. So full disclosure, if you hadn't listened to Friday's episode, which was a mailbag, we recorded that before Kyle McDaniel of ESPN dropped his top 100. We did that before the news of the TV deal and a bunch of other stuff dropped. So that stuff, that's not all outdated, but that part is at least. So we're going to start off today's show with the Kyle Manzardo talk. And we've had this talk a couple times already in the podcast about what's going to happen to him on opening day and how Cleveland's going to handle this situation and how much of an impact the top 100 rankings had on him. So, you know, as we've said before, the process of how this works is incredibly flawed. You have ESPN, which is an odd choice for this, MLB Pipeline, which makes sense, and Baseball America, which I think makes sense in terms of how you're actually planning this. But a prospect has to make 2 of the 3 of those top 100 lists, and he has to start the day on the opening day roster in order for a team to recoup a draft pick if that player wins Rookie of the Year. There are some stipulations, like if the player's hurt or something, and he still has to accrue a year of service time or whatever. There are some like weird workarounds, but they're very minimal. I think Adley Rutschman qualified for one of those or something because he was hurt. They still got a pick for that. I don't know. No, they didn't get a pick because Julio Rodriguez won that year, but he still qualified. Either way, so Kyle Manzardo does make ESPN. He was on Pipeline. He was not on MLB's. Was not on Baseball America's top 100. So Manzardo officially does qualify as a player if the Guardians were to start him on the open day roster. If he won the Rookie of the Year, they could recoup a draft pick. It is probably a tough field in 2024. Let's admit. You're going to have some very good players in the American League. It could be tough. And first basemen just don't win that award that often. And I know we said that this probably influences how Cleveland handles him in spring training. And if he makes the open day roster, this will definitely have an impact. But I don't take it as any guarantee that he's going to make the opening day roster, which is funny. And I've seen people upset over this. And I totally understand this. Like, this is not really where I wanted to have the discussion, Jeff, but in this scenario of Davis and De Los Santos makes the open day roster, right? Because he's a Rule 5 pick, and Kyle Manzardo doesn't. You hear the Guardians' arguments about, well, young players in April in Cleveland, and it's hard to hit, and all this other stuff. It's a service time excuse, right? That's literally sitting there. I know it's hard to hit in April in Cleveland. I'm not going to say it isn't. It is hard. It's easy. It's not. But obviously, it's hard to take them seriously if they use that argument with De Los Santos and Manzardo, with Manzardo starting in AAA and De Los Santos not starting in the majors. But again, I don't see it's a very silly argument that people are getting upset about on Twitter. I understand that.
I mean,
but I don't take the situation as any indication that Manzardo for sure starts the year on the open day roster, which I know is not a popular opinion.
Yeah, I don't think it is guaranteed either. And I also don't think it's the biggest deal in the world if he doesn't. I think, it's an apples and oranges in this case, because you have to have Devison. I'm sorry, getting his name wrong. You have to have him on the roster or he's gone. It is a situation where it's not like you can do anything else. He's there or he's not. So if you're going to give him a chance, if he does not look terrible in spring training, then he has to be there. So you have to figure out how you're going to make it work. And also, again, Manzardo was great in AFL, where all hitters are great. He had an up and down year. It's not like this is a slam dunk. This is not like it is a situation where he start to finish was tearing the cover off the ball. Yes, he had injuries. Yes, he's had off the field. Not like when I say off the field, his mom's been very sick, and it's a public story that's out there. But that weighs on. I mean, anyone who's dealt with illness in your family, that weighs on you. Best of just sending positive vibes to the Manzardo clan. But there are reasons for him to not necessarily be there when you have a guy. Like, again, if they didn't take someone in the Rule 5, then they really wouldn't have a case unless they went out and signed someone, which they obviously have not done. Who knows? We'll get into some money later on. Maybe that could still occur. But right now, with the situation, I think there is a world where it makes sense, because one also has to point out Manzardo's game. He's been working on power, but that is not his game necessarily. And I think it would be wonderful if he got anywhere near Tristan Cassis this season a year ago, and that was not even a player who was in discussion for it is hard for a first baseman to win Rookie of the Year unless there is no one else in the field. Like, he's going to lose out to every other position. So as much as, hey, it's great, yeah, he could net you a first-round pick, if we're being really honest, he's not going to net you a first-round pick. It's going to take the rest of the field kind of falling flat on their face, because he's not a big power guy. It'd be one thing if he was someone who we thought would go out and hit 30 home runs. That's not him.
Yeah, the ceiling is like 25 home runs. Now I want to sit there and say we know that for sure, because anything can happen, because nobody thought that Jose Ramirez was going to hit 30 home runs. So
or
anything's possible.
Or
Lindor.
The higher extreme he hit.
Yeah, we don't know these things for sure. So I can't sit there and say that, he's a 25 home run hitter at best. He could be more, but I would still take 25 home runs from that position. And the other argument we had, not argument, but the other discussion we had last week, or is it 2 weeks ago? I can't keep track, but guys who are, I understand why they're doing the top 100 prospects as part of the incentive, because those are the guys that get their service time manipulated. So those are the ones, that's why they're doing this, to protect them from having that happen. And that's why they're attaching a draft pick as an incentive. But as we said, Kyle Manzardo is not really your service time manipulative player like Stephen Kwan wasn't. This isn't a guy that you're, how much money are you going to save? You get the extra year of control. That's fine. But he's 20. He's going to be 24 this year. So at best, if he starts the year on the open day roster, he hits free agency at 29. He's already a first baseman. First baseman, unless you're a 40 home run hitter, like you said, Jeff, power does get you paid in arbitration. But if we don't think Manzardo is a 40 home run hitter at first base, like, the bar for a first baseman to get big money is what Pete Alonso, look at Pete Alonso has done in arbitration, right? Do you think Kyle Manzardo is Pete Alonso? Probably not. Is that a range of outcomes? Maybe, like the most extreme 99th percentile outcome, maybe. But that's how you get paid in arbitration. And that's why you see the Francisco Lindors, like I said, those guys get held back into June for Super 2 reasons, because they're going to get expensive in Super 2. So Cleveland wouldn't want to pay someone like that. Manzardo's probably not that guy. And how desperate are you? And this is also the argument for not giving him an extension right now, unless it's a really cheap one that makes sense for Cleveland. How badly do you want to lock up a first baseman past his age 29 season that is not a 40 home run hitter? That's the question. So does Cleveland, we said that this top 100 ranking for him doesn't guarantee he's going to start the year on the opening day roster, but at the same time, who he is as a player doesn't suggest that you have to play service time games with him, because there are reasons that he won't get that expensive, or you're not necessarily looking to lock him up because he doesn't have those traits at his position. It's a position that's hard to clear the bar for. I know I'm making one argument and giving the other now, but
and one other thing you have to point out too, on a very basic level, is we got to be honest. a draft pick is not as valuable as an extra year of control. It's just not. Like, even a
Right.
first round pick of, we're talking about the prime year control of a guy who wins Rookie of the Year, who should be at 6 years a very good player. That is more valuable in a draft pick because of the innate risk of the draft pick. So at the end of the day, I was kind of surprised we've seen the teams roll with this, but at the same time, hey, Seattle got Julio to sign an extension. Baltimore is just like, hey, they're going to leave in a few years, but we'll see if the new ownership situation there. But yeah, it's at the end of the day, as much as this is incentivification, it is also not. For a lot of teams, an extra year of control is more valuable.
That's a very fair argument, and I don't want to make it seem like I'm saying I don't think Manzardo is a good player because
he's my top prospect.
Yeah, he's my number one prospect. I'll be honest. I think he is my top prospect in the system. But that also has a little bit to do with the farm system rankings, which we're going to talk about in a minute. We're just going to mention it in passing. We're not going to spend a lot of time on it. But yeah, he's my top prospect. So don't take that argument for me as saying I don't think he's a good player. I think he's going to be a good player. But at the same time, there are reasons to believe that I think he could be on the open day roster because the ceiling maybe isn't high enough to really warrant yourself to doing those things. But like you said, the extra year control is extremely valuable. If he is as good as you think he's going to be, then the extra year of service time makes a ton of sense. Even if you let him go to a Super 2 status. Cleveland's had a couple of those in recent years because of the Padres trade. It's not the end of the world, and he may not be a guy that makes a ton of money in arbitration. So you can live with it, and maybe David Blitzer is paying that money and not the Dolans. We got to pay some bills here. We got to talk about farm system rankings, some trades over the weekend, and finally some TV updates for the most part, all coming up. You could pay some bills too by making some money off of FanDuel during the Super Bowl. Happy Super Bowl to all those who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. For me on Super Bowl Sunday, I am getting some good takeout. Used to go to bars and watch the game, but I'm getting older and I like sitting at home and watching the game at my convenience. And honestly, I want to hear the commercials. I like the commercials. I like the food on Super Bowl Sunday. Maybe that's not your favorite thing. Maybe you're into the game. I want to see Cleveland native Travis Kelce get another one. I'll be honest about that. So maybe you like placing some bets. I would love to place a bet on Travis Kelce winning another Super Bowl ring. So many ways for you to end the season with a W or 2 or 3 on FanDuel. Not only can you bet on who's going to win the Super Bowl, you can also place bets on which players are scoring a touchdown, how many points are going to be scored, and a whole lot more. And if you're a new customer, join today. You'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. So win that first bet of $5, you're going to get $200 in bonus bets from FanDuel. So visit FanDuel.com/lockdown to sign up. FanDuel.com/lockdown. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So you mentioned the farm system. Manzardo's up both of our top prospects. I think at least is mine. Some of that's due to the farm not being quite as good. So right now, just real quickly, Baseball America has Cleveland at 19, ESPN at 21, and I think those are fair. I think that's a fair range for them, and hopefully by summer, when they re-rank these things, Espino has pitched and he's healthy, and the Guardians knock the draft out of the park, and they're maybe up to like 15th or 14th at best.
And I see a lot of people get worried about this. How many systems, and I've talked about this before, would survive graduating out 3 starting pitchers and a potential all-star catcher? I mean, there are people who view Williams and Bybee as all-star ceilings and nailers. They graduated 3 all-star ceilings, and Logan Allen, who is a very good, bet to be a long-term rotation arm. And there was Espino's injury, and there was, the injury to Justin Campbell, and there was a lot of other things that kind of brought this down. Now, there's also some guys who had to step up, the Blairs, the Rocchios, but this is fair. But I also don't think, like I've seen some people be like, oh, the front office should be on notice. It's like, not over the rankings. The only reason they're low is because they've been successful. They were very successful in terms of recent graduations.
Yeah, it's like we said on Friday for that question. It's fair to criticize some of the decisions they've made, for sure. But yeah, people need to remember that just because the farm rankings are not great right now, they're going to have a huge chance this draft to change that. And there are some guys that could step back up. But yeah, you graduated 3 of your top 5 rotation pitchers last year, who are going to be here for, well, 2 of them will be here for 5 or 6 years. We'll see about the third one. You all know who I'm talking about. And then, yeah, you graduated Bo Naylor, who could be an all-star. And you also, 2 years ago, graduated Stephen Kwan. Like, these are all good players. So let's not act like the roof is on fire here or the house is on fire here, because they've graduated good players who are going to be here for a couple more runs at this thing. There's still better decisions to be made and moves to be made, but yeah, the house is not collapsing because of these rankings. Absolutely not. All right, the big deal over the weekend, Jeff, I know you had a lot to say on the Corbin Burnes deal. I have to go back and delete like all of our shows from a year ago when I said, oh, the Guardians are going to trade for Corbin Burnes, and it never happened. Now he goes to the Orioles. Not only does he go to the Orioles, I don't know, I'm not a huge fan of this return for the Brewers, but they did get the 34th overall pick, which is pretty valuable. And I'm also adding in, by the way, we're going to mention this because this is indirectly related to Shane Bieber. The Dodgers had interested in Shane Bieber over the winter. Nothing ever happened. I expect nothing will happen at this point, but because this trade, we can kind of,
because he's already traded to the Reds back in December, right? Because that's he was imminently traded, and if it wasn't the Reds, it was going to be the Cubs by the end of the week.
Cubs.
And then,
here we are. Although, hey, this time last year, you and I were talking about him, and we said,
yeah,
when is Bieber going to get traded? And we said like January 16th or something. I think there was a reminder on your phone.
Yeah, there was an alarm, but I was not reporting it as actual facts.
Yeah,
we were implying
dartboard.
So I think this deal gets misreported in a lot of ways. It's not intentional, but honestly, this deal, if you're the Orioles, is you're trading Joey Ortiz, you're trading DL Hall, and you're trading the 35th overall pick for Corbin Burnes and a pick that is likely to be higher than 35th overall the next year. Now, I don't know if it's still this way, but for a long time in the NFL, it was viewed as like a trade, a pick that was a year out was worth 1 round less. So even though it's going to be a higher pick, since they're not getting it as soon, it would be like more of a second rounder, which if you look at it that way, makes this return a little bit lesser. But I think at the same time, if you are the Brewers who are trying to be like the Guardians and retool, Ortiz allows them to also flip Adames, who we've seen is now on the block. He is a very well-regarded shortstop, great defender, and a lot of people really like Hall, and Hall could be the next great reliever for this team, though they could try him out as a starter and see. I think, we had this is one of those things we didn't necessarily agree on. We had some back and forth debates, but I think it's worth pointing out that like for someone like Burnes, who's entering his free agent year, he's had 3 years of declining strikeout data and 3 years of increasing walk data. And I know there's a lot of peripherals are still very good for him. I'm not saying he is not a good pitcher, but he has shown some like minor stuff here or there. And it's 1 year. You're not going to get a lot for 1 year. You never get a lot for 1 year. And if you're looking like, oh, what would have Baltimore given up for Bieber? I'm not sure if you get any one of those pieces.
No, I don't think so. I mean, like I texted you, Burnes is still projected, even with those metrics that you talked about, is still projected to be one of the top 5 pitchers in baseball. And I think he's going to go out and pitch his off because it's his free agent year as well. He wants to test that market. I think he wants close to Garrett Cole money. I don't think he'll get Garrett Cole money, but yeah, I'm not a big fan of the return because I think DL Hall is a reliever, which I don't know. You're right. Like, I'm not a big fan of the return, but at the same time, I think this shows us what the value is of a player with 1 year left on their contract. It is what it is. Like, they're never as high as you think they are. Just look at the Polanco thing, right? Although Polanco could be a 2-year deal if they pick up the option, or is it him? I can't remember who has the option. If it's him or yeah. So, and Cleveland was not going to get any draft pick for Shane Bieber. Doesn't matter. I mean, again, people are going to ask, I thought you couldn't trade draft picks. You can trade competitive balance picks, which is there's 6 in the first in the A round. I think there's 7 in the competitive balance B round. So 13 picks can be traded, and only those 13 specific picks can be traded. I don't think you cannot trade a comp pick for a free agent, and you cannot trade the PPI pick, which is the prospect promotion incentive. That is not a tradable pick either. So yeah, Cleveland was not going to get one of those for Shane Bieber unless they added something to the trade. And yeah, you weren't going to get Ortiz or Hall, and you didn't need either of those players anyway, but you weren't going to get anybody of that caliber. Like, as much as I didn't really love the return for the Brewers, and the thing I don't like for the Brewers, I know this isn't Locked On Brewers, but they signed Rhys Hoskins. I thought they were going to try to compete this year, and they went out and traded Burnes. I get why they did it, because is this trade better than what they would have gotten for the comp pick a year from now? Absolutely. Yeah. Hall and Ortiz and a pick this year are way better than a comp pick in 2025 when you don't know as much about the draft class. I'm not saying it wasn't a move they had to make, but at least in terms of with Bieber, the problem is you're not getting close to this trade. So right now, a comp pick in 2025 is better than what you're going to get for Bieber, because if they were going to get a better offer for Bieber than the comp pick they could get next year. Let's be clear. If he gets hurt or pitches as bad as he did before he got hurt in 2023, they're not giving the qualifying offer probably. So you might get nothing. But if he does pitch well enough and you're winning and you get the comp pick, that's better. It's probably better than what they've been offered so far this winter, which is why no trade has been made. Right?
Yeah. I mean, if you could have gotten Hall and an outfielder, they'd probably do that deal, because you can move Hall into your bullpen, right? You can maybe set it up where then you're feeling easier about trading at Class A, because there's a chance that Hall's probably going to become, like I said, the next guy up for the Brewers in terms of their relief development. But you're not getting that. And that's why all along, it's like, that's why all along I've kind of been like, they're not trading him, because the just value isn't there. And, Cubs fans dove into my comments of like, oh, he's practically for free. It's like, no, he isn't free. It's, if you're not giving up value, they're not going to trade him, and the value being offered does not match anywhere remotely close. And it's like, you're not going to trade him for 10 cents on the dollar right now. That's not what this team has rarely, if ever, done that. And they'll run with him, because especially if you get to midseason and he's pitching like he did in 2021, you sometimes get better deals at the deadline when teams are a little more desperate. Like you have seen bigger values than Corbin Burnes got at the deadline.
Jordan Montgomery.
Yeah.
I don't know if the Jordan Montgomery deal is better than the Burnes deal, but it's close enough
for a guy who was not any. I mean, we tend to forget Jordan Montgomery, without that postseason run, is regarded as a very good mid-rotation starter, but is now getting treated like a
mid-rotation. Yeah, well, still a mid-rotation guy, but a guy who deserves some money.
Yeah.
We'll talk about somebody the Guardians signed over the weekend. The White Sox made some trades. We have an update on the TV situation, at least a slight update. And then the Guardians hired a replay coordinator. A very interesting choice at that. So all that coming up. All right. I say, let's just talk about Tyler Zuber real quick, because I think this is interesting. Okay. I know we want to talk about the White Sox thing. Maybe that's a tomorrow topic, because it's not changing anytime soon. But Guardians did add another non-roster invitee. We've talked about almost all of them that were interesting. I know there are a couple we didn't, but Tyler Zuber is an interesting name that's coming to Cleveland on a minor league deal. And I know, Jeff, you said before we were recording that he's essentially depth, because he hasn't pitched the major since 2021. And I think he must have had Tommy John in 2022 because he didn't pitch. And then he pitched a little in 2023. It wasn't great. But prior to 2021, this guy is 28 years old. He's not even
right shoulder impingement syndrome.
That's not great. Okay. I don't know. Shoulders are all pretty rough. It's not. If you would have said Tommy John, I would have felt a lot better. But shoulders are rough. But prior to the injury, things were pretty good for him in the minors. He missed bats. He didn't walk a ton of guys. The numbers were good. He looked like he was on track to be a relief option for the Royals. Then he got hurt, and then, I didn't realize this too. They also promoted him to the majors in 2020 during the COVID year, and he had never pitched above AA. So that could have been, something that hindered his development too. But you made a good point about Royals pitchers too that I'll let you point out here about Zuber. Not neither of us are saying this is going to be a great signing, but if you squint, there are some things here that at least you can look at and say, okay, I understand why they're throwing this dart at the dartboard, and it's a zero risk signing anyway, but I can see why they're throwing this dart at the dartboard at least.
So Zuber misses bats, with some control issues, big injury concern. Why do you take a gamble? Coming up, he was actually pretty well thought of in this Royal system. But just like every pitcher who's well thought of in this Royal system, it didn't work out. And the Royals,
I'm sorry.
The Royals are awful at development, maybe the worst team at pitcher development. I remember an article, a few years ago, where like players that were talking to the Royals versus the Indians would literally talk about different things. Like they would not talk about advanced stats to the scouts coming to them because they knew that Moore would view that as a negative. Dayton Moore ran that team like it was the 1980s. And yeah, they won a World Series, and we'd all take a World Series, but there's a reason why they haven't gotten back. It's almost like a luck one. Like they got talent there at the right time, but since then, it's been awful, and the development's been terrible. And guys regress, guys step back. That Royals team has been picking in the top 10 for how many years now? They had 0 prospects in the top 100. 0. We complain about Cleveland's. How do you pick in the top 10 like 10 years in a row and not have a single because you're awful? So yeah, you should absolutely be gambling on everyone Kansas City Cuts go because they are a poop show right now. And why not gamble on a team that's like that bad at development? Like Cleveland made hay back in the day when the Reds were awful at development and just taking arms from them and seeing if they could find an extra gear. And some like Scott Moss didn't work, but they did have others that they were successful with. And hey, why not?
So are you saying I shouldn't believe that Brady Singer in the first half last year is the new Royals ace?
I mean, I've been told that Brady Singer is like the next ace for the last like half a decade. Whereas the people I talk to all, and I know they used to have Jackson Kowar, but I didn't talk to anyone who was in the scouting and or writing field who did not. And I know places had Singer higher than Kowar, but the people I trusted, people who now work for major colleges, all agreed Kowar had the better stuff. Like there was a reason why Singer was not. A lot of people were very down on him, and he slid in the draft for that reason. And who jumped up with the Royals? Who drafted Luke Hochevar #1 overall? Like you go back and look at some of their
He had a
things, and
decent
it's like,
career as a reliever, though.
no, he didn't. He had like a good year and a half. Like he
which
was not
coincided with a World Series ring at least.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
they
you're
were
right.
they've been awful. Like this is the team that you should absolutely see if there's anything left because we know they're not doing a good job. No one. Why did the Braves go for Kowar? Because hey, maybe it'll be something. But I guess they flipped him
There's
anyway.
untapped potential. It's
But you're
yeah,
looking at
it's the same.
untapped potential.
It's the same argument as picking from Florida because
Yeah.
they leave developmental meat on the bone that hasn't been taken advantage of in a player's arm talent. And there's injuries. Zuber did throw at the Driveline Pro Day. I know we talked about this with the Carlos Carrasco thing, and we talked about how sometimes this gets overblown, the Driveline thing. But the numbers all looked the same about Zuber pre-injury. Like it was mid-90s fastball, hard slider, a cutter, a curveball that looked really interesting. And those were all the things that made him a good prospect with the Royals. And it's just it's a pro day, and it's Driveline. There's no guarantees, but Cleveland, took a chance on Carrasco. They took a chance on Zuber. Both guys that threw there. So
doesn't cost you hardly anything, and maybe you get lucky.
And you know what? You need a lot of innings to soak up in spring training because things happen. Guys are working low innings at a time. There's always injuries. And if you're adding to the Columbus bullpen, let's say that, you're talking about...
There's a lot of injuries in it, too, with guys who are going to be on pitch counts.
Yeah, and you're talking about Tim Herron and Cade Smith riding the I-71 shuttle throughout the year. You're hoping to use them a little bit, and you're hoping maybe you're not moving a couple of guys up to AAA just yet. You need the filler depth too, so there is that. Speaking of filling in for a year, we will get the Guardians on Bally Sports again for 2024. Don't all clap at once hearing that. Is it a good deal for 2024 for fans? Probably not. Like it's not going to be a fan-friendly thing for 2024. It's the same places that have carried Bally before. I highly doubt you're going to see some new carriage contracts like you have YouTube TV or whatever, or Direct TV, you're probably not getting Bally's again. But they're back for a year. They know where they're playing their games at TV-wise next year. And then they get to renegotiate in 2025, and hopefully that's better for everybody. That's about all I can say. Jeff, you had some other numbers on that, though.
Yeah, so I ran through it. They're supposed to make $55 million. You take 15% away. That's about 45. No, that's not 45. It's about $8 million. It's close to 48. So at the other side of it, if you go back and listen to a podcast, I can't even tell you which one, but I had talked about earlier this year, the idea that, that they could be down to 40 or even lower based on the Padres money from a year ago, but that they were expected to make somewhere between 7 to 8 million from the luxury tax because less teams can get that money and more teams spent than ever. So they've balanced this out. So now they don't have this hanging over their head. Now,
Oh no, we
be able
lost.
to go and maybe add something. That there is some wiggle now. I'll be curious to see if they jump in at all. But it does get rid of that. It is one more year here. We don't know if there's an outside chance they could appear on some kind of deal with Amazon or not. That is not.
They will not for this year. They will not for 2024.
Okay.
That is not happening.
So that is unfortunate, but yeah, no. At least this should give them some breathing room.
Yes or no? Will they make a free agent? Not a free agent. Will they make a significant move after this is now all been ironed out for 2024? Yes or no? By significant, I mean, let's say their most significant move of the offseason. Technically, if you want to throw the Scott Barlow deal in, I'll agree with you because the Scott Barlow money over what they were going to pay Enyel De Los Santos is a big shift money wise. But other than the Barlow thing, the biggest offseason move they made is Austin Hedges. So, are they going to make a move better than one of those two?
Yes, I do believe they will. I think that they have some room to operate. We saw them get Zunino and get Bell last year. And yeah, they're kind of pre-spent some of that money with the Segura situation, but I think they have a little room for wiggle. I think they have the ability to go out and get someone. And we see a lot of bats still left out there, and prices are coming down.
Let's hope. All right. Well, we hope that you will stick with us throughout the week. Again, we're back on your feeds 5 days a week starting today. We've got a lot coming up. We've got our prospect and position player tools draft. We will draft tools from individual players and try to build the best prospect from the Guardians farm system. We will do our annual prospect draft, our second annual prospect draft. We'll do that. More on prospect rankings. We've got some draft stuff coming up. We'll have a guest, I think, next week in terms of the draft. Later this month, we'll catch up with our buddy Andre Knott from spring training. We're hoping for some other interviews, draft related too, as well, coming up before spring training gets started. So please stick with us.
Yep. Remember to rate and review, download, do your part. It helps. Thank you all for listening. I'd like to thank some of our everydayers like Cheeks Malone and Go Guardians Go.